Okay,
Ross,
let's see.
Domoney, welcome to Uncontaminated Sounds, my totally unscripted series that I've almost grew to 700,000 views so far, and I love to talk culture, particularly photography and videography and documentary, and I found your work on Instagram recently, and I fell in love with it, and matches my ethos. So, welcome.
Thanks for having me on your show. It's much appreciated.
And from what I understand, you're in Athens now. No, not Athens, but in Greece, or
In Athens, yeah. I used to live here actually, so I'm just coming back to visit friends, and it's like a stopping point before another trip. The first trip for Shadowgraph, but I can't really say much about it for now, but I'll be able to tell you on the other side.
of course, of course. Um, so let's start from the beginning before we get into your current work and your years of documenting and making documentaries and stills. What drew you to the medium in the first place? Like, when was the first time you picked up the camera and like, this is it. This is my life right here.
I think it had to be to do with dyslexia and being unfocused at school and having a lot of fun at school, but just never feeling that I found myself with any of the subjects. And then I always felt pretty cool with like art and drama. And I was very lucky after school to find a great mentor who's a really good photographer called Rod Morris.
Hmm.
And I worked out that I didn't have to do A levels afterwards. I could kind of go straight to college. And this passion that I had, while I was at school, kind of making stupid jackass videos and all that stuff that some people do when they're younger. I realized that I could kind of put that passion and craft into something a little bit more serious. And yeah, I went quite into the depths of photography and analog photography. And it was just this huge joy and passport to take me into other worlds, both with my imagination and also, literally how you would meet people across the world or meet people in dodgy political circumstances. And, that kind of springboarded back onto video afterwards. And here we are today, this journey.
And now you grew up in the UK, is that correct? I assume, or
Yeah,
I
I
get
was
yeah,
mostly in the UK. I spent a bit of time in Athens working as well. So it's kind of like half in Greece and then a lot of the time in UK.
cool. And like during your process of developing your craft, what what type of film were you using? Was it 35 millimeter? What cameras were you using? And did you do you enjoy the development process as well in like the dark room or and stuff like that?
Oh man, I love the dark room. We've actually recently gone back to it as well because I suddenly realized, like most of us, that so much of our lives are totally painfully digital now. And I've got a dark room again in my place where I'm staying, and it's just this world you get lost in, right? And you don't come out for hours, and you kind of lose track of checking your phone and checking what's happening in the real world. And that was the process that I learned at college as well. It was this whole excitement of darkroom, and it was all 35 mil. Did a
Hmm.
bit of color photography, but maybe my patience wasn't kind of up to the whole process. So I just stuck quite rawly to black and white. And yeah, man, I have that same excitement I had when I first kind of learned about photography.
Oh, that's a good thing though. That's your trade and that's your I guess I yeah, that's your trade when you just like still love it, and you get excited about it. I never had the opportunity to dive into a dark room, but through my digital production, I love the printing process. So I always control the output of what I control, what I show in a physical print. But I take it serious, like as a methodological process as well. I love going to a digital lab, and I could spend hours just, tweaking the detail in my imagery. And of course, I do have an affinity for black and white as well. It's just near and dear to me, and thus is Uncontaminated Sounds branding as well, just black and white.
So
Um,
good.
and I think, yeah, again, just in a black and white image is so much more detail, and particularly, like you said, in the oversaturated age of content, which I still don't like that word because it's just a corporatized, you know, uh word, but I guess we all have to adapt as creators. But yeah, no, um it's just a lovely process too. It's just a methodological sorry, I can't speak right now. I'm kind of
It's all
running
good.
on
I also
fumes.
can't speak very words well, so
Well,
can't even
yeah.
say the
Well,
thing I'm trying to say.
well, this is why we translate into visual imagery, right? It's like,
Exactly. We're visualizing right now.
yes, yeah. Like
Yeah.
in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, this is like I'm framing a nice narrative, but I'm like, I don't know what it looks like right now in
Nah.
the present. But so I actually, so when you left school, like, did you know you were gonna really aim for like documentary stuff or human interest pieces, or politically charged stuff, or like did you have any other aspirations to do like any other work, commercial photography or product, et cetera, et cetera? But
So I was in like the kind of photography world when everyone was also saying that that world was dying a bit, when all the phones were coming along and it was so accessible for everyone to have digital cameras. So it was quite hard for me. Like I never made kind of a real living off photography. And I just thought I should go into video because it's something that, I could, it wasn't about money or anything. And I definitely don't make very much money still from what I do. But it was just a little bit of an easier way to kind of tell stories, and it was catching up with how the medium was changing as well.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I mean, photography for me, it's a massive part of filmmaking anyway. It's like the way that you see images is in the moving image. Of course, both the processes are totally different. Um, and when I was younger, and I still do it quite a lot now, I'm quite into adrenaline sports. So I love my mountain biking and all of these things. And I guess at that age, kind of getting into political struggles and things, it was all very exciting for me. And it was like a merging of all of these worlds, like telling narratives, getting into adrenaline induced situations, and then also finding a way with the craft to kind of put that into like a visual literacy that makes sense. And yeah, of course, I did lots of dumb shit. And at that age, thought that I knew stuff. And then you grow a bit older and you realize that you know nothing and the world is infinitely full of contradictions. And yeah, it's like a never-ending journey of learning.
oh, precisely. I think I'm kind of at that point myself. Well, just I'm 38 and this month turning 39. I'm like, shit. How do I get this old? And like, yeah, realizing, yeah, all those contradictions, and kind of realizing also I never want to be in an office again. Like I like going out there in the world and documenting, particularly these days where there's so many stories that don't get told in the mainstream media, or major news outlets. It's like there's so much opportunity um for independent journalists to tell these unique stories too, that could be overrun by the major headlines currently. But yeah, I'm kind of like, I'm at the process of going back to my child self. I'm like, oh, what was I drawn to? It definitely wasn't technology because we didn't have like UX design, like, so I'm like, it was travel, adventure. And that's where I'm like syncing up with my, you know, more recently found love and passion. And apparently, in New York at least, people like my work, so it's like for photography. But then I'm realizing it all ties back to my curiosity and my kind of investigative process. And I have a undergrad degree in criminal justice,
I heard that on one of your podcasts. I was trying to
Oh,
work you
cool.
out, so yeah.
um and I totally need to update my site. Like I do need like interns or something, because I'm like, I keep on going, I keep on creating, but then I need to like I need to update my site for all the archives, because there's some beautiful stuff um that is just in my SD cards right now. Like uh so I know that process well. Just like, yeah, I got to tap into what's really authentic to myself and do that. And I mean, this year it's been like I gotta go out, do like and tell stories on an international level or more politically charged level, and not be scared to, because I love music, I love arts, and I love documenting music. But I need to go deeper. My mind is more complex than uh, just bands, which I love music, but I need to go deep. Like I need to get out there in the fray too of documenting more important, socially engaging stories as well. Um, so
You
I
could
guess,
combine all those things together.
yeah, no,
You
I
could combine politics and social issues and music and bands. I mean, there's a really nice story in all of that as well.
well, oh, sorry to cut you off. No, I find that art does bind culture, communities together too. I love art. It's arts, music, big proponent of just unbiased freedom of expression, and we're seeing on a global scale the fight against that, from governments. Um, Viewers and listeners can guess which governor. So, like, it's pretty clear. There's a fight against true freedom of expression from press, and internationally. So I try my best to fight against that, because I'm a big proponent of voicing yourself, your expression through whatever medium you so choose. Um,
Yeah.
so what was your first experience like in the field, documenting? What was your first film? I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch everything on your website, but
No worries. I think we do that thing where people probably delete their or like don't publicize their older work because when you look back at it, you're like, wow, did I make that? What was I thinking? But the first one I did was an oil depot near my parents' house that blew up.
hmm,
And it was in this town called Hemel Hempstead. And it was kind of a very badly made documentary with lots of zooms in and out with the camera, but it was quite run and gun. And there was like an excitement behind the footage. And then after that, the first kind of like actual political film that I made was with the far right in England.
hmm,
And it was quite got amazing access to this far right street movement at the time called the English Defence League. And it was a really strange feeling because it was not like flying to another country and doing something that made you uncomfortable and then you had kind of the luxury of being able to leave again afterwards.
hmm.
It was like doing things within your own communities, going to the pubs afterwards and like recognizing guys. You're like, oh, that guy looks like a fucking fascist from the, am I allowed to swear, by the way?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a fascist from the scene that I was filming. And then you can't go to the airport and leave afterwards. Those people are around in your community. And it was quite almost like a little bit of a paranoid experience, but I got really into the access and making the film. And it was a very weird way to kind of express yourself as well, because I knew totally where I stood politically, but I couldn't be my full open self with these people I was hanging out with.
Hmm,
And of course, I couldn't lie and pretend to be one of them because that's just a complete load of bullshit. So it was this weird kind of middle ground. And it was capturing this politics that was quite extreme in the UK at the time. Their biggest march that they had in Dudley, I think they had like 7,000 skinheads,
wow.
on the streets, going to communities, looking for people from ethnic minority backgrounds and smashing up shops and stuff and
Hmm,
attacking mosques. And they used to threaten journalists a lot. And they used to accuse people all the time of being communists, put photographs of people on their blogs. Then there was this like kind of inter-division gang war that the fascists had between this leader guy that was popular that we were filming in the north. And then the founder of the group, didn't like this guy. So there was all this like madness going on. But at the same time, we had this quite amazing access to spend time with them. We were like on the buses when they were driving to all the marches. And yeah, I just remember it was a very strong feeling, like kind of throwing you into politics, but on the other side. And yeah, I felt it's quite strange after that for a while.
hmm,
And then after that, I had an amazing opportunity to go to Chile with my friend and his mum. And his mother was locked up under Pinochet's regime
hmm,
for being politically active. And it was this amazing story about her and her friends going back to the theater that was in like in a desert, secluded theater where they were held captive And they were showing us the places like in the wallpaper where they would like sneak messages either down or up to the male prisoners that were in the same building.
Yeah.
And it was like going into them, the kind of opposite side of politics. Of course, the people that were after them were like total fascists because it was Pinochet's regime. But her and her friends were on the complete opposite side. And they had this kind of whole rebirth and opening of politics. And yeah, I mean, every film you do is different, and it gives you a new layer and a new process of thought. And it's the same feeling for me now. I go into a situation and I learn a lot, and then I'm reading a lot afterwards. I'm having a lot of conversations. You often get quite traumatized. And of course, it's right for us to talk about how we feel when we work, but there's also, it's very different to the experience that people have who have to be amongst those communities 24/7, and they live there and they don't have the freedom to move. So yeah, I'm humbled and yeah, just deeply moved and grateful for the experiences I've had with my films.
Now, well, I would love to touch upon that because I find it is a privilege to go be able to go out and experience the world in different communities, and and understanding that most people can't. Most people are stuck in the just trying to survive mode, and I it's certainly in my limited experiences too, and not even on your level. It's changed me and my outlook of the way we live as humans, and I think for the better. But going back to like friends from home, even just in Boston, Mass, which is a few hours away, I could never reconnect with my old friends in the corporate world because I've changed. My perspective has changed because I've gone out, and even in New York City, which is like a microcosm of the larger world, and it's a tough city to survive in. That's my own. I hope to create my own series about my stories just in New York City, but you know, I think yeah, travel and experiences change you. I don't know where I'm trying to get with this. It was more of a statement than a follow up question, but it adds more depth to you as a person, I assume, which has happened to myself. You become more intelligent on a humanistic level, I guess, and not just get spoon fed just streams of information from your square rectangle of technological box, whatever that may be these days. But uh, yeah, that was more of an observation. My question to that though was, were you organically starting these projects? Or did you already have sources out? You don't have to tell all methodologies because trade craft all that, but I'm just curious, were these concepts initially your ideas, and then did you follow up with sources and connections, etc., that you knew, and then started to develop from there? And also, did you get some funding for these projects initially, or it was just bootstrapping?
So it's a combination of all different things together. So some of the projects have been my idea from the start. Other projects have been collaborations with people. Other projects have been conversations with people that then like both brains or three brains put them into power and motion. Some of them have been commissioned beforehand. Lots of them get kind of, well, that you just lose money at the end, I think, or maybe you sell on the product at the end if you're kind of working for someone. Done a few crowd funds with projects too. And then, yeah, just kind of like straight up commissions, more to do with video journalism stuff than documentary. So I do quite a lot of video journalism, and then I'm also doing documentary. And I feel that those two worlds are very similar, but they also have differences because documentaries, when you have low funding, you end up being locked away from the world for a long time because you're trying to finish these projects. And the reality is that a lot of the time is on the computer, editing or trying to raise dosh or managing the projects. And video journalism, on the other hand, is kind of a bit of a quicker turnaround because you're turning around smaller packages and pieces and you're getting across information. But I don't know, after a while with video journalism, I wanted to kind of almost merge the worlds together, which is when I started this Shadowgraph thing that you've seen on Instagram.
Oh
But
yes,
maybe we want to get to that in a certain point in your interview. I don't know.
of course. No, I always love to talk about current projects for people. Uh, and yeah, let's actually let's go to Shadowgraph. I noticed on Insta, I'm just like, oh, this is fascinating because I'm like, I love photojournalism. I like the style. I'm like, oh, I'm always curious. But what? Please explain. What's the concept? What are you trying to develop with Shadowgraph, and where do you hope to see it going? I guess.
So for me, I think Shadowgraph is like a merging of worlds between my practices and experiences with like video journalism, documentary, and then these imaginative realms that sit in between. And of course, it's a political project. It's about stories that, they're socially conscious stories. They're journalistic in nature as well, but we're not afraid to kind of blur all of these worlds together. And we're not, stating that we're staying, this is objective and factual and kind of rigid journalism. It's kind of using the different filmmaking crafts to embrace the chaos of the world that we live in at the moment. And, I know lots of people who've kind of been involved in politics and filmmaking for a while, and they almost feel they're almost quite burnt out with the state of the world or the state of the industries. And I want to use Shadowgraph to kind of embrace this dystopia that we're in, but not stick, solely to a totally doomer vibe. It's more like, finding creative ways to look at the world with a combination of video journalism, documentary, and these kind of imaginations in the middle. So it has a bit of a sci-fi vibe. I'm still building, what it is now, but I think it's starting to get some feet, as they sing.
Oh yes, no, I love just starting a new idea, a new project, and seeing where it's going. And it seems like you're developing more like a sphere or like a ecosystem. So you have the uh podcast, and then now you're doing a TV series too on in YouTube. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, so we've got some like film series already recorded in the can, and I'm going to be kind of releasing them in parts and then working on filming like the next series that's coming out. And then the goal is also to break those videos down into like educational, practical film videos and like how to go about doing these like filmmaking techniques and kind of have like an online academy for this quite weird style of storytelling. Hopefully that will keep the channel going as well. And then the podcast is like ticking over every week. It's kind of gone a bit more into a news format now of what's going on around the world. Sometimes I like getting kind of into the depths of quite creative writing and blurring this like sci-fi vibe with reality.
mm, mm.
Um, and yeah,
Oh yeah, I was listening to the recent one you did in Greece, of course, with the feminist victory in Greece, and also I listened to the Doctor's Struggle. Uh, I'm like, I actually dig just like the 12-minute bits or like 9 minute, the short form kind of clips, because I'm like, oh yeah, it is kind of like I'm getting this information just in a short narrative, whereas I'm doing like hour conversations. I'm like, I still love the long format for myself because I like to have conversations, but I love that concept, is that like structure of like short amount of time and telling a narrative within that timeline. Um, though yeah, no, I guess that was an observation on my end, not a question per se, but um, I guess, man, I'm going blank. Sorry.
it's
I
all
need
good.
I need more coffee. I must profess I like coffee, my coffee, and
I
um
love being.
um have you faced any like through your work or any like blowback, I guess, or any pressure from these groups you've covered to stop, or like not say particularly threats per se, but some dicey situations or I guess yeah, pressure from groups covered or groups that did not want your message or your feed to come up?
There's been, yeah, a few different. I used to film a lot of stuff on the streets with protests and riots, and there would always be people that would be quite anti-media in different contexts from different political groups, and there were, acts of violence sometimes, and kind of threats and threat also, violence from the police as well, super common. And then, yeah, filming in kind of conflict zones where I'm not like I've never wanted to be like a kind of frontline journalist or documentary maker, but always kind of find myself with those projects like on the periphery of conflict zones. And in between those moments, there's also been some quite tense times where you just have to plan quite well and think responsibly how you're going to plan the next parts of your trip. And but I've also talked a lot with friends about trauma as well. And trauma comes in so many forms. It comes in like the way that you might see something, or the vibrations that you feel on your body from experiencing something. Or it can also be kind of trauma that's passed on, like when you interview someone and the things that they say to you, if you're understanding the language, or even afterwards when you're editing it and you're going over it again and again. These things can have an effect on you. So you can have an actual physical effect when you're out and there's like a dangerous situation, or you have kind of, yeah, like a bit of a post-traumatic stress disorder. I guess PTSD also has many different forms as well.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I made the mistake of watching 20 Days in Mariupol
Oh,
recently,
yeah.
right before bed. That was no, that was not a good
Wow.
choice, but it was the power of that documentary is, I don't know, yeah, if I could be there myself and be, yeah, like you said, frontline um journalist like that, but being a native of your country, you have to be, I guess so. It's a different realm of but yeah, like just the power of imagery, I guess. If we go kind of on a higher level of just visual narratives and the way it can affect uh social change, because most people are not witnessing these events. Here in the States, we're in a mostly comfortable living scenario of like work, house, in these bubbles. We've never really had to deal with uh you know strifes or conflicts, what we've seen in Europe, uh Africa, Mexico, to down to Central America, down to South America. We've relatively, again, sorry, tripping over my words, been safe. We've had our own social issues, of course, but regarding conflicts such as what we're seeing now, particularly in Ukraine, the aggression of Russia, and then also now in Middle East, and uh, which has me very anxious now because it's just the trends. If you look at history, this is basically a pre World War, scenario and the atmosphere
Mm.
globally. Um, so I had a point where I was going to wrap back to, I guess, the power of visual imagery. How can that affect policy in the people's and how people view what's going on in the world, I guess.
That's a good question. I mean, that documentary from Mariupol, he was incredibly brave for the work that he did and his choice to stay there when it was put under total siege by Russia. And his job, in a classic sense, was to bear witness to what was happening. But I don't know, I feel as I'm older now and you kind of learn a bit more about the world, and you also simultaneously get more kind of confused and perhaps numb about the things that happen. People know that these things were happening in these sieges, and we see the videos on Instagram. Every day, people see videos of what's happening in Gaza at the moment. And we also feel, there are people that have this brave role to witness and to make these films. But I don't know, we also know somehow that those war machines and the United States of America, the United Kingdom, Russia, another imperial power doing terrible things. These imperial bastard powers are, the war machine continues and the evidence comes out and the wheels continue churning around.
Mm.
And, things do change, and it comes from a huge combination of kind of pressure on the streets, political will, you know, will from nations also all coming together, and also these like people who bear witness and make films. But I think, films alone, it's quite hard to make a change. Maybe I'm a little bit cynical about it, but I'm sure in history as well, there has been examples of when films have changed policy, and they just, we certainly know that they change people on a subjective level and on an emotional level in the audience when they watch the film. But to change truly the war machine and the policy, yeah, those wheels just keep churning as well.
Yeah, that's a different ball game. Yeah, no, yeah, it's just like such a large mechanism, these war machines now. Um, if you go back to history, starting after post-war WW2, that Cold War has now actually kind of turned into a hot war, that but yeah, no, it's like, yeah, if actually from my previous conversation this week, it's like, okay, my question is, how does this investigation that you're kind of speaking out about these conditions affect change? I think it has to start organically, right? Or more homegrown or more community based. So if I see or read this report or see your documentary, I spread it to my local community and help spread and educate people on what's going on and say whatever subject matter. And then I think when you have enough people, enough communities to put pressure on local politicians, or even like here in the senators and congressmen, that's when you have masses to apply the pressure on these leaders who can then go to, like here in DC, to make changes. But I feel like it has to be organically in a community oriented, because like you said, just the scale of everything. And you try to say, here's my film, um I hope it makes changes. It won't. I think you'll see drastic change in a community, though, if you show your films
Of
within,
course.
a local community, if I'm incorrect or not. But
No, no, I agree with you. And you can change. I remember when I first got into documentary, when I made the film on that oil depot that blew up, and it was like they had an exhibition for the film on a bus.
yeah.
And I watched this lady watch the film, and I saw her crying when she was watching it. I was like, whoa, this is like very powerful medium that you can, I know it's very simplistic, but like how you can affect people's emotions and you can move them emotionally. And of course, 100% documentary, video journalism, fiction films, all these different mediums, they totally affect the conscious and subconscious minds of people, of masses of people. But I just feel it's a hard feeling to swallow that we are all moved by what's going on in the world. So many of us, so many decent human people,
Mm.
like a logic that a child would have, a beautiful child that knows more things than terrible adults do sometimes. And we all want to change, and we're witnessing these things that are happening. We're watching them through our phones in the most kind of high quality and disturbing of videos and formats, and things aren't changing. We're waiting for them to stop. We're waiting for a ceasefire. We're waiting for the policies to align when, these nightmares will finally end. And, it's not just one nightmare, there's multiple places where it's hard. And yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I hope it's not defeatist, but
No, no,
I agree with what you're saying, that you can move communities, and that's amazing. and it's definitely a power for the work. But it's just hard that we're in this moment where we're waiting. Everyone's waiting. I just, it's hard to watch.
No, uh I totally agree too. And I'm not trying to be like fluffy, like changed. Like I'm very a realist. I've spent time in the geopolitical realm. I've been making contacts in DC. I know the powerhouse that is war policy, and the money behind it. I am a realist, Um, but when I start thinking like that, I'm like, I get into a bit of a, I guess, depression. Not even like severe depression, just maybe more I try not to get into the defeatist attitude, but yeah, the reality is, yeah, the majority of people don't want these conflicts happening, or they don't want to see people get killed for reasons they don't really understand. Um, but it's still happening, you know. Um,
Mm.
so it's like, yeah, rallying a community together may feel good, but yeah, it's still gonna happen. The scale at which uh and power behind these occurrences it's hard to fathom, really, and hard to fathom any change from a strict community or one's politician. Yeah, no, it is thinking. If you zoom out and think about it, and you have the knowledge about the money and the power behind such global conflicts, it's like,
It's madness.
yeah, no, it's but however, uh I think, yeah, no, yeah, it's tough. But so I guess on that note, why do you continue uh creating such work and telling narratives as such?
Good question. So this brings us back to Shadowgraph, and for the first series that we're launching, I actually recorded it quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
I've kept going with it and have updated it over the years, but I wanted to find a new format for kind of video journalism and not just, totally bombard people with all the bad things that are happening in the world. So when I was working kind of on the streets as a reporter with my camera, I'd spend time overground, filming the demonstrations or what's happening, getting this kind of like, this journalistic view on things. And then in my spare time, I would always go underground, into like different cities, kind of in conflict or having like intense political situations, and spend time on their metro systems or subway systems. And I kind of built up this collection of just going around and like asking commuters what they dream about in their sleep. So I've got this
Cool.
huge collection of people's subconscious on trains all over the world. And I did
Interesting.
some filming in Ukraine just before the full-scale Russian invasion. So there were already Russian proxies and actual Russian soldiers as well in the east of Ukraine at that time. But Kiev, wasn't under threat. So I had this footage from the amazing subway systems in Ukraine just before the big war.
Wow.
And then we went back when the full-scale invasion happened and we filmed more dreams. There's stuff from America when Trump was inaugurated and all these, different places. And it's quite an interesting language to understanding like the way the vibrations that people are feeling amongst intense political situations. So for
Mm.
me, that was like a more exciting way to kind of retell journalistic stories about the world, to zoom out, but try and tackle it from a subconscious point of view. And that is definitely one of the styles that Shadowgraph wants to tackle. And yes, we have the podcast, it does the news things. Sometimes I do get really like carried away and end up kind of spending way too much time writing some dystopian story. But I'm trying to do the podcast kind of as a thing in the background. And now the focus is on the film series. And we're just going somewhere to film another film series. It's kind of in that same language, but in a slightly different context. And that's what I want Shadowgraph to do, is to kind of tell these, global pressing stories of our times, but kind of doing it in this quite unique language.
Fascinating. It's like, yeah, there's so much of the literal pardon me, literal interpretation of events out there, and we see all the imagery, you know, and bombings, et cetera, et cetera. But going into the subconscious minds of the populace in those regions or wherever, that's cool. That's an awesome perspective that I look forward to seeing it. And also, so when do you expect to distribute and launch the video stuff?
If all goes well, in a few weeks' time, so 1 to 2 weeks' time, you'll start seeing vibrations on Instagram and everything. And yeah, and then it's hard, isn't it, when you do these independent channels because you're like, okay, I'm going to release this content, and then how long is that content going to keep on going for?
Yeah.
And you know, these are more like well thought out films, and I don't want to fall into the trap of just making kind of like I don't know, like daily self-help YouTube videos. Well, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So the filmmaking side of the platform will be kind of, you know, well-crafted stories. Hopefully the podcast keeps everything going. And then, yeah, I have to also find a way to finance the whole project. And that's a whole other thing, isn't it?
That's the tough tough thing is making a living from it or financing the project, which a battle I've been or fighting. But again, it's like you need traction to kind of pitch, say, prospective funders too. It's like, oh, I have some traction now. This is what I have. But if the project is not gaining traction, nobody's going to really invest in it per se because you know it's not taking. But so that's where it's like my it was just I wanted to build off of the stills I was creating in 2019 and earlier from 2017 in music and culture to go deeper and have a deeper conversation behind the stills. It started with like thinking about process and creative processes, and then uh, I'm really, yeah. It, I just like having conversations with people in all of all fields, and particularly creative fields, of course. But now I'm getting into more of these conversations of photojournalistic, investigative stuff because that's my natural disposition as well. Kind of gearing back to my criminal justice studies, I never really wanted to be you know in the system as a police officer because I knew the system was kind of flawed in my end. I kind of want to be more in forensics, so that I through studying forensics in class picked up photographic techniques though in documenting scenes and crime scenes, you know. So I have a series of stills I've shown a few times in local spots of like found objects, you know, in just white in a white background, I think, in just kind of shot from straight down as a kind of evidentiary kind of object, you know. um I gotta develop that those studies more, but I don't know where it's going. I'm just saying. Uh, and then, yeah, I took a hiatus last year, but then I realizing not doing this, it made me kind of got me down because I was like, I need to do this, you know? So I think um, you got to grow, you know, just do it because you need to do it and then see where it goes on a monetary side of things. But I don't know where it's going that I turned it inwards to myself. But uh, I did notice you were trying to set up some workshops too, and to educate people in documentary filmmaking. Is that correct?
Yeah, educate is a bit of a dodgy word. I think I might have said it myself earlier, but it's not like you know, I'm telling people that this is what you do and this is how you do it, blah, blah, blah. But it's more like, yeah, sharing like an online academy with these kind of filmmaker techniques based on practical experience, cut with some of the footage that I've shot around the world. And yeah, I want to do it on quite kind of like weird philosophies to do with filmmaking and things about vulnerability and rejection, because you know, when you ask people for interviews, sometimes you can get shut down on the streets, and how you can find strength and power from this process. Because I think for a lot of people, it's kind of like a courage thing as well. They're like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to go about doing it and who I talk to and how I talk to them. So yeah, I would really like to kind of build this online community and kind of use my films that I've publicized on the internet and maybe kind of break down the process behind making them and do them in quite strategic, practical workshops And I've taught quite a few workshops in person with like either one-to-ones or small groups of up to 12 people. And it's a really nice process, like a practical process where people always come out with a film at the end. Um, so yeah, I hope to be able to pass that on kind of via the Shadowgraph network. But I feel I have to build, a few more things first,
Yes,
and
yes.
then it's kind of going to come as the next tier or whatever of the project.
Cool. Now, I was curious if that was uh kind of established or just a futuristic kind of project, or I guess tentacle in the project or arm. I think of things as octopus, but
Yeah, it's coming soon.
yeah, cool, cool. No, it's fascinating because again, education aspect or just spread of information and about technique and giving people courage to create their own, narratives is also a method to kind of, speak, empower people to create and speak up and see, just discover the world of film and documentary processes, I guess.
Totally. And also, I want to like, this kind of like feeling that some people have at the moment, that a lot of us have, about this political hopelessness and this living in this kind of like dystopia. Filmmaking and storytelling doesn't have to only be filmmaking. It could be podcasting or different ways that you're using a craft, as you said, to empower people and make people feel that they're not helpless and that they have a voice in this crazy world, or they can give a voice to their community. Politics can be everywhere. Politics can be on your whole road. You don't have to travel far to tell a great story and to make a difference with this story. Much like we were talking about before, with how this could be screened locally in your community, and it can affect the consciousness of just people around your local area. People have conversations, don't they, when they watch something powerful or hear something powerful. And that, to me, that's great politics. Now, when we're talking about stuff in a community.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess we can wrap up by asking you one, for any young potential filmmaker or creative out there, doesn't even have to be filmmaker. And as you said, it with the tools we have, it's an ecosystem of creativity, of audio, conversations, YouTube, film, video, stills, etc. For any young creatives out there who may be hesitant or or maybe, yeah, just hesitant of pursuing this path, any advice to the younger generations now? Wow, I'm saying that I'm getting older too.
Yeah, I just say get lost in those worlds and make something. Try out different formats. Don't be scared to do that, and also don't be scared to show people what you've made as well. Because I think a lot of people, they experiment with things and they make things, and then they're like, "Oh, I don't feel like showing someone that." And a big part of it is to step out of that kind of, that cave of your mind and your creative process, and see what people think of it, and be able to hear kind of criticism. And yeah, there are bad people out there who over criticize for their own personal reasons, and you just have to keep going with things and build. Yeah, try things out. Watch the videos online and the technique things. You can make great stuff from your phone now. And yeah, it's awesome when you make something, you put it out on the internet, for example, and people share it or they comment on it. That's a success for me.
Actually, do you utilize TikTok at all as well, or
I did sign up for a TikTok account for Shadowgraph, and I started posting a few things, but it's just, yeah, it feels like another kind of world that does. It's quite similar to Instagram though. And yeah, I
well,
have
I
started posting it. I need to do more.
what I've noticed is you do get more views on Instagram, no, TikTok, like so many more views than even I posted just a random local thing, like about a lot being chopped down next to my apartment of trees, and they were just going to build this useless commercial building. And I just posted this video of the empty lot that used to be vibrant trees. It was like 500 views, and I just created this random account, So it's like TikTok is a good platform to get some, more, I guess reach maybe Gen Z or younger generations too And I'm like, oh man, again, I'm dating myself. I feel so old, Gen Z. But yeah, there's so many different methods these days to get out your content, and it just, I guess, having a methodology to stick with it and having that produce, like I'm gonna post each day or at this time, but or something, keeping consistency. Uh, but on that note, talk, I guess, man, yeah, I think we covered a lot. That's what I wanted. So I guess one other question though. So do you think we're in Orwell's 1984? Yeah, are we in? Has literature became reality?
Um, yeah, I don't feel so like bleak about the world, but I just feel that we have a comfortable life and reality where we live, and there are other places where it's a total
Mm.
dystopia. And it's a dystopia with the way that military use technology and AI. And we may well see dystopias very soon in the not so distant future of like how, I don't know, governments manage climate refugees. I mean, these are all real things that are going to happen. And there's great films like Children of Men. I don't know if you've seen that film, but it's always
Oh,
quite
great
haunting for
film.
me.
So good.
And you see that when you also do that kind of work, you see images of that in reality, and
Mm.
they are real. But our life simultaneously here in the West is also real. Also in America, man, it's everything's normal on the surface, and you have mass shootings at schools and stuff. So
Oh, that's
what
that
what
that's a
is normal?
conversation for another day. Oh yeah, no, I agree. So one last question: is there hope for us humans? Should we have reasons to hope? Or are we just being inundated by constant 24 hours news cycle, which naturally we shouldn't be exposed to? But prior to the advent of the web and social media, we would have had just maybe some newspapers or local news coverage, but we're just being constantly bombarded with 24/7 streams of all this imagery. So I guess, yeah, where can one find hope in these days of constant flows of information and constant conflict? Yeah.
Yeah, put your phones down, everyone, myself included. And the world needs there to be strong people, emotionally intelligent people. And if too many of us get defeatist, then all of these dark powers in the world will be able to really do the things that they do the worst and continue to do. And I remember in the first lockdown, I just did this really nice thing with my friend. He was actually the photography teacher I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, who kind of showed me the light with photography when I was at college. And we just went out every day with our video cameras and tripods. And we just went into nature in the UK, and we just like filmed static shots. We're like, okay, each shot has to be 2 minutes long, no movement in the camera, no thinking about what's the conflict and story and the drama. And you just press record and just watch nature and have this simplicity of nature in front of you that's infinitely complex and beautiful. Of course, it's under threat as well, and you could go into a whole climate doomer thing as well. But that whole process of just leaving this madness and doing something quite simple, I thought was very powerful. And we should
Mm.
all, yeah, don't get burnt out. We need good people in the world.
This is true. This is true. Go back to minimalism, um, actual tangible books, and nature, just uh, digital detoxes. But kind of going antithesis with that, where can people find Shadowgraph's work?
So if you want dystopia, but creative dystopia, we're on Instagram, which is Shadowgraph_media. And then we're also on YouTube. Let me just make sure that I say the right YouTube address because it's all new. 1 second. We're on YouTube, which is at Shadowgraph_TV. There are platforms. Whoa, are you still there?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Oh, I think I lost you on the thing. Hey,
Oh,
yeah. So Shadowgraph underscore TV at YouTube and Shadowgraph underscore media on Instagram.
cool, cool. And I'll definitely push it out on my end too, because a big proponent of what you're doing, and of course, love your style. And thank you so much for your time, sir. And if you can hang tight after I stop recording, that'd be much appreciated.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. Let's see.